This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Voodoo. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am the Global GARD Coordinator, and I would like to acknowledge our sponsors. Because of them, we are able to be here today. So I just would like to play a really quick video acknowledgement. All right. So Dr. Evangeline Silva, she is a professor here at Michigan State University for Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering for the Nanobiosensors Laboratory. Today, she will be talking to you about entrepreneurship for scientists. I'll let you take it from here and let me know if you need anything.
All right. Thank you, Chelsea. And thank you, GARD, again, for this wonderful opportunity to share our expertise in entrepreneurship for scientists. And I would like to just share my screen and we can go directly from here. All right. So are you able to see my screen?
No, it's really weird. It's okay. There we go. If you make it full screen, that'll be better though.
All right. Okay. So we are here. This Entrepreneurship for Scientists is part of our GARD Academy. And last time we have some questions about whether entrepreneurship can be learned and how can we pursue entrepreneurship. I would really strongly encourage you to go into some kind of entrepreneurship or develop entrepreneurial mindset. So let's start here. I had a question. In one word, express your understanding of entrepreneurship. Would you like to share that on the chat? And then the second question is, are you interested to go into a business venture? And then the third question is, do you want your business for profit or nonprofit? So any answer on the chat? What is entrepreneurship to you? Do you have any response from the chat? All right. Taking risks.
I see taking risks and youth.
Very good. How about, are you interested to go into a business venture? None? Okay, so don't be intimidated with entrepreneurship. This is really something fun to do. And Chelsea, I think there are people response in the chat.
Yeah, I was just waiting to get a second to say it. So I see taking risk and growth and the process of doing business for profit and more business ventures for me.
Very good. Yeah. So let's see if we can create some business today. All right. In this short period of time, let's try our best to create some business. So let's go to the topic. So my outline will go from entrepreneurial mindset and how that mindset influence your entrepreneurial research or endeavor, so that then you can bring about a useful product that you can start for business or go into a business venture. So let's look at entrepreneurial mindset. It is a skill set that enable people to identify and make the most of opportunities and overcome and learn from setbacks and succeed in various settings. That's a mindset. So a mindset is a way of thinking. And so if you can prepare yourself to develop that kind of mindset where you try to identify and make opportunities and overcome challenges, you basically have an entrepreneurial mindset. So what is an entrepreneurial mindset? It is a value mindset. So I have here on the slide a mindset, a value mindset, where people who have entrepreneurial mindset are not necessarily interested in gaining wealth, but in adding value to society. So in other words, how do you think yourself in such a way that you see something that is needed by society and you will be the one to add value to that? Or you fill in the missing, the gap in there. That's an entrepreneur mindset. Now, entrepreneur mindset also, or value mindset, people who have those mindsets are self-confident. They are not intimidated by challenges. They take challenges as opportunities. All right. And then these people with that value mindset think that capabilities are not inherent. In other words, no one is born to be a businessman. No one is born to be entrepreneurial. No one is born to have these wonderful products. Capabilities are learned. So you can learn entrepreneurship. That was a question yesterday. You can learn entrepreneurship. And people with value mindset are self-control. External circumstances to them are noise. They have internal compass that gives them direction on what they want to do. So if they want to do something, they will do it, and they can do it because external circumstances for them do not bother them. Those are noises. And finally, people with entrepreneur mindset or value mindset, they are not distracted. They are focused. They get to where they want to go. Whether you're going with them or not, they are going there. So they are very focused. So, but these mindsets can be developed. You can develop the idea that you value others, so you add value to society. You look at challenge, you could look at problem as challenges or opportunities. I mean, you are self-directed. You want to learn capabilities. You have an internal compass, and you are focused. So once you have that mindset, that leads to creativity and innovation. So creativity leads to innovation. Creativity is not innovation, but it is needed in innovation. So creativity is something you create or you conceive of originally or unusual, something that is outside the box. But if you stop there, it's not innovation. Innovation, you have to bring that to practical reality. That is where innovation comes into the picture. People who are creative and innovative bring new products to the market. So you can think of many people right now who are very much into contributing value to society, like electric vehicles, Tesla, right? These are people who are into like networking, things like that, that they see something that society needs and then they work towards it. So the question is, probably so you have seen this question, do you believe that creativity and innovation can be developed? Yes or no? As I said earlier, it can be developed. How? This is where you learn techniques on how to develop creativity and innovation. So, one thing, there are several things you need to develop the skills in creativity. One is you need to look at the problem correctly. You need to define the problem correctly. How do you define the problem correctly? By looking at the situation, asking people around the problem, and interacting with the nearest groups in that environment and observing them so that then you can correctly define the problem. As there is a saying, problem correctly defined is half the solution. All right? Because there's no amount of great technology you develop or great science you develop if it is not designed for the right problem, it will not solve anything. So correctly defining the problem is part of creativity. Second, get to know what is the problem and develop your skills towards solving that problem or related to that problem. You don't have to have all the skills yourself. You can partner with people who have the skills, but get to know all the problem and see if the problem that the skills that you have or your team has, they have the solution to that problem. Second is do not compromise. The failure for creativity is when people start compromising. You have to do not compromise. You have to be focused. And then finally, overcome psychological inertia. Psychological inertia is this tendency to just embrace the status quo. Now, that is a psychological inertia. Overcome the status quo. If you're able to do this, just these basic 4 items, correctly define the problem, get some knowledge about the problem and your skills as well, do not compromise and overcome psychological inertia, you will be in the realm of creativity. Then the next, so I have a question. Identify some status quo that you want to break. Just quickly on the chat, any status quo that you're probably frustrated. I'll give you like a minute. Write in the chat. Any status quo that you want to break up because you are just so frustrated. Do you have any response?
No, I'm waiting for them though. You all can respond in Huvo or you can respond here on Zoom.
It doesn't matter. We just want to see what are those status quo, because I would like at the end of this lecture that somehow we build up a company or we build a business. Okay, think about that and you can send a chat as we go along. All right, now you can develop innovation. First, there are techniques in innovation. One of the techniques is that problems and solutions repeat across sciences and industries. So in other words, say you are in food safety or in food production. You have a problem. Look at other industries. Maybe those problems, the problems that you have already occurred in other industries or sciences, and they may have already solved those problems. They may not exactly be the same, but the pattern or the principles are there. So for me, when I see some problems, I especially look at the automobile industry or the airline industry. They're very much advanced in their sciences and in their technologies. So if I have a problem, I say, okay, what did the automobile industry have this? Do they have similar thing? Let's say there's a problem in the food supply chain. Now, the supply chain of the automobile industry and the supply chain of the airline industry is very, very strong, well established. So you look at there, like, what do I have? What are similarities that they have? And how did they solve them? And can I use these principles that their solution to my problem? So problems and solutions repeat across sciences and industries. So you don't have to start from scratch. Secondly, if you can resolve technical contradictions, you are in the realm of innovation. For example, there are opposites, hot and cold. If you can resolve, say, for example, people like to drink hot coffee because it tastes good. But hot coffee sometimes can burn. So you want it cold. So there's a contradiction there, a hot and cold. So if you can develop a technology where you can have the coffee just perfect temperature and sell it to the public, I think people will be willing to pay for it. Anytime you have someone willing to pay for your technology or for your invention, that is business. Another way is to resolve technical gaps. Say, for example, there's a, let's look at the COVID-19 pandemic, where there were a lot of technologies on the PCR test, and there were technologies on the rapid test, home test. But the home tests sometimes have low sensitivity, but they are easy, they're cheaper. The PCR is more sensitive, but they're expensive, and it takes a few days. So can you find a technical answer the gap? That is innovation. And then you resolve physical contradiction. For example, you want to monitor something every day or every minute, but there's some kind of privacy issues. So if you can develop a technology that can allow you to monitor every minute, but remove the privacy issue or overcome the privacy issue, that's innovation. All right. So just in the chat, identify some technical contradictions that you know. As I said, hot and cold, slow and fast, light and heavy, all these contradictions. Let's have a minute on the chat. Give me some feedback.
So it sounds like you're kind of looking for opposites, like smooth and rough, right?
Yes. When there are opposites and when there are contradictions, if you can develop a technology that will address that contradiction, that is business, because somebody will be willing to pay for that. Anything?
Nope, I'm not seeing anything, but I'll let you know if I do.
Okay, let's proceed. Keep that in mind because we will have a workshop. So once you resolve contradictions, as I said earlier, like a car that is accelerating fast will require high energy consumption. Now, if you can develop a car that can accelerate very fast without using energy, that is innovation. Okay, so now you have your mindset affecting, influencing your creativity and innovation. You can develop what we call the ideal final result. So you look at the problem and you say, what's the ideal? And we call this ideality. Ideality, or say ideal final result, means that you maximize the benefits and minimize the cost or harm. So how do you maximize the benefits? How can you develop a technology that maximizes the benefits, but has no cost and has no harm? So the ideal function will be maximum benefit, zero cost, and zero harm. That will be the ideal scenario. This is what we call the problem solves itself, where you get the problem solved without putting any cost into it, and there is no harm into it. So the ideal final result of any problem is that you don't do anything, the problem will solve itself, but that's the ideal. So you state an example, an ideal final result of the problem. For example, a diagnostic test that can detect SARS-CoV-2 before it infects people at no cost and without negative side effects. That's the ideal scenario. But once you have this statement, you actually have started a business proposition. Because if you can make this statement happen, somebody will be willing to pay for it. All right? If you can have a diagnostic test that can detect SARS-CoV-2 before it infects people at no cost to you and without negative side effects, that's your ideal scenario. So you keep that in mind and you say, okay, this is something I want to pursue. All right. So from there, We will now move into entrepreneurial research. How do you propose or move about such that this kind of mindset will influence your research? So with that mindset, remember, you are trying to develop something that is useful to society. Remember, you have a value mindset. You are going to add value to society. Anyone that adds value to society, a technology that adds value to society, someone somewhere will be willing to pay for it. So now that becomes now a customer responsive technology, where your customers meet the scientist. All right. So the customers meeting the scientist, you develop a customer responsive technology. And that is what we call entrepreneurial research. So let's look at the technology readiness level. I am not so sure if you're familiar with the technology readiness level, we call it TRL, but this will guide us into moving the research that will add value to society. This TRL has been formulated by NASA in early 2000 and has been adopted by the Department of Defense and National Institute of Health and many other sciences and funding agencies who are using this as their metric. So you have to be familiar with the TRLs so that you can sort of talk about it. So the TRL is basically the value chain of doing research. TRL 1 starts with just a research idea. TRL 1, 2, and 3 are what we call the concept phase. You're looking, you have an idea. In other words, there's a contradiction and you want to solve the contradiction. You do a literature search to check out whether your idea is valid, and you develop a project plan. 1, 2, 3. TRL 1, 2, 3. TRL 4 and 5 is what we call the proof of concept. You start developing it and you start standardizing it. You're doing this in the lab, in your lab experiments, and you're trying to standardize, develop a methodology, develop a protocol to make sure that what you're developing is consistent. You get consistent results. TRL 6, 7, 8 is what we call now from evaluation or validation. If this were a diagnostic, this will be preclinical evaluation phase for TRL 6. TRL 7 would be technology transfer phase, and then clinical evaluation phase. And then finally, TRL 9, you go into commercialization. So let's look at what are the steps and how do you create an entrepreneurial research. The first one, at TRL 2, you have to bring in your customer already. So this is what we call customer's voice or customer discovery. And customer discovery, you pivot that and there's a feedback loop to have your customer validation. You try to start it as soon as possible. When you have a research idea, excuse me, bring in your customer. Who are your customers? So that then you are developing the technology with your customer in mind. Remember, you want to add value to society. You have to identify what is your market niche, which group is going to be using this, and who will benefit from this. Now, there are different kinds of customers. Of course, we're familiar with the end user. The end users are the final users for this one. Say, for example, if you have a diagnostic test, if it is a lab-based, probably the medical technologists will be the users. Or if it is a bedside technology, maybe the doctors will be using it. If it is a technology for animal diseases, maybe the veterinarians will be using it. So you have to identify exactly who will be the users, because the kind of development you have depends on who will be the user. For example, you say, well, I want to have a portable biosensor. Let's just take that as an example. If you have to have a portable biosensor and say the user will be the physician, that means it's used in the bedside, or if it's a veterinarian, it will be used by near the animals or the clinics. It cannot be very heavy. So you have to factor in how much weight can the hand handle. In other words, you don't want the veterinarian to be carrying a very heavy instrument if it is defined as portable. So the weight is shape, the ergonomics, all these things will come into play in your design. The other customer would be the regulators. Are there regulatory bodies? In the United States, that would be the Food and Drug Administration. Are there regulatory requirements? The other customer would be the retailers. Who will be selling this? Are they happy selling this? What are the infrastructure needed to retail this? Will this be in stores or will this be online? How are these going to be distributed? Vendors, how are they going to be distributed? Will they be displays or will this be just boxes? How are these technologies displayed? Or if you are, say, for example, a combine that is huge, do you need a field? Or if you have a diagnostic test that is very small, you probably will just need a shelf. So depending on your technology, you need to look at who will be the vendors. And then the marketing, how are these going to be marketed? And finally, the manufacturer. Will there even be a manufacturer? Is there an infrastructure in your country or in the US or anywhere you are, in your locality, that is able to manufacture this? All these are part of your customers. So your customers will have to come in as early as TRL2. And then this customer discovery and customer validation will go all the way until commercialization. Basically, your customers, you're trying to add value to society, will have to be carried through and into commercialization. So next, patentability, marketability, robustness, ownership. You should be thinking about that at TRL4. When you're developing your biosensor in the lab, you're validating them, you're testing your protocols, you're developing your methods, you have to be thinking of patentability. Because if you want to sell something in the market, the owner or the ones who will pay for this will want to make sure that they own the patent or they own the technology. And so you have to ask the question, is your technology novel? Is there uniqueness in your technology compared to the existing ones? Is your technology non-obvious? In other words, will somebody need your technology or somebody just make it at home? I mean, if somebody can make it at home, then it's obvious. And is it useful? Does it add value to society? The marketability side would be, who will be your user? What is your market niche? How big is your user? For example, if I have a technology that only say a certain group of people in a certain region, they are the only ones that will use that, then you have a very small market size. But if you have a technology that will say the whole world will be able to use it, you have a global market size. And so now, depending on your market size, you can have your plan of whether you want to develop this into a big business or just a niche, special niche business. So there are businesses that are very special, that only certain people can use, but they are useful to those special people. So those are types of marketability analysis you have to do. To your competitors, are there competitors now, or are there competitors in the future? Do you see yourself competing of the existing? Or the technology niche is so big that you have already competitors in the pipeline? You have to know your competitors, because you might be able to, let's say it takes 3 years, 4 years to develop your technology, but you don't want that by the time you finish your technology on TRL9, your technology is already obsolete. So you have to be careful of becoming obsolete before you even finish. Then robustness. Is your technology performance better than what you have, what is available now? In the area of diagnostics, is it more sensitive? Is it more specific? Is it does it require cold temperature storage or room temperature storage? What are the requirements? And then the validation of your technology. Have you validated it? And then finally, you have to ask yourself, who owns your technology? At the university in where I operate, the university owns our technology. So everything we do, everything we work about, MSU owns them. So you have to check it out. Who owns the patent? Who owns your technology? So then the next one is your supply chain. Manufacturability. Who are your partners in the supply chain? Let's go back to the diagnostic. Say, for example, a biosensor for SARS-CoV-2, which is the COVID-19. If I design a biosensor in the lab, I won't be able to supply the whole world when I go to commercialization. So you give it to somebody who can provide who can manufacture the technology. But then the question is, there are many parts in that biosensor. Where will I get the parts? And if I get the parts, will the vendor be able to give me high volume so that I can supply the whole world? So those are issues in your supply chain that you have to be thinking about when you look at manufacturability of your technology. And then in that manufacturability, you have to look at what are the requirements. Say, for example, if I have a biosensor that uses, let's say, test tubes, where will I get the test tubes? If I start selling them to the whole world, will I be able to get like millions of test tubes a day, or only a certain volume a day? So now, instead of being able to supply the whole world, I can't because I don't have the parts. And then you look at production cost versus profit. Is it worthwhile? Is it worthwhile manufacturing this? And then, who are the license potentials here? Who would be willing to license this and make this into a marketable product? This is also the stage where you want to do a SWOT analysis. What's your strength? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? And what are your threats? For opportunities, you can say, well, for example, I have a SARS-CoV-2 biosensor, but now that SARS-CoV-2 is under control, or is not as much as there's not as many incidents occurring. What happens to the businesses that put out SARS-CoV-2 diagnostics? Are they still there, or they have folded out? So most of those companies will be looking for other types of diseases that they can transform their SARS-CoV-2 diagnosis into maybe a diagnostic for influenza virus or diagnostic for norovirus. So they will be looking for other opportunities. And the area of threats, where you have the technology, are there new methods of detection such that your biosensor or your technology becomes obsolete in 2 years or in 3 years because there are new modalities. In other words, if you have a lateral flow technology, maybe lateral flow will be overcome by some kind of really cheap PCR products or PCR technologies, things like that. You have to be thinking about that because it requires money, it requires time to bring products to the market. So you don't want to become obsolete, as I said earlier, before you even finish your product. And then once again, your supply chain. Who are your supplier of your components? Are they able to supply the volume that you need for the market niche that you have? Then, regulatory requirements. In the United States, it's FDA. What are the regulatory requirements? So in some cases, they have to, going back to the SARS-CoV-2 detection, you have to run it to many patients. You have to run it through many laboratory facilities to make sure that the results are consistent. That requires a lot of money. So what are the regulatory barriers in terms of food safety in your country? What are the regulatory barriers? Can you move faster? Because those things require time and require money. And then you want also to check, are there challenges to your patentability? Maybe you have the patent, but a component of your patent, somebody holds the patent of the component of your patent. So in other words, the parts of your patent is owned by somebody else. So you cannot practice your patent, you cannot practice your technology because a part of it is owned by somebody else. You have to make sure your challenges on the patentability. Another issue is, yes, you have the patent, but you cannot enforce it. So for example, a typical challenges to procedures, say you have a patent on procedures. Well, procedure is very hard to implement, to monitor because somebody changes slightly the procedure and it's not anymore your procedure. And can you enforce that? So it cannot be enforced because somebody can just change it, tweak it, minor, and it's not anymore your patent. So those areas, those are issues that you have to be thinking about. So regulatories, work, time, in terms of patentability, basically one issue is like your technology cannot be patented. See, in applying for patent, it takes a while. So you apply for patent for that year, there's a review, at least if I express and share my experience here in the US, it takes about 5 years for the patent, US Patent Office, US Patent and Trademark Office to review your patent. And what if at the end of 5 years, the USPTO says, actually, you cannot patent it if somebody already has it. So you wasted 5 years of your time because now you cannot have the patent, or there is no freedom to operate, or the patent cannot be enforced, things like that. So you have to make sure that you are able to implement your patent. And this is the time to be looking at that. Look at that as soon as possible. So now with that, you have at that stage, you have exercised your entrepreneurial mindset to an entrepreneurial research. You have now a useful product. So you start going into commercialization. So now you go into technology transfer where you need money. In other words, you're asking people to give you money to bring your business, or somebody else will do it for you. And this is the financing at TRL 7 and 9. These are the types of financing that's available, at least in the US. We have what we call startup financing, which starts with seed money, startup or first round, second round, and mezzanine. And then when you have a mature technology, you can go into initial public offering, we call that IPO. And then there is the secondary offering. So in this mature technology, the IPO range already like millions of dollars here. In the startup, you can go from thousands to a few millions or maybe 10 million. Whereas in the mature technology IPO, you're already talking about 100 million or so. But these are all the types of financing. I will not go into detail this. You can ask me if you're interested. So then we now go into commercialization. You either do a commercialization yourself or you sell it. You have its licensed to somebody, to a company who will do the commercialization themselves. So now by that time you have your useful product, you have added value to society, and somebody is willing to pay for it. So now you have a business potential. So let's have some exercises so that I'd like for you to see if you can develop a business idea from this lecture, from this short course. So I want you to identify a technical contradiction and state a solution in the ideal final resort form. In other words, you want to develop a technology with a maximum benefit at no cost or no harm. And if you can put that in specific terms, that's the start of your business. So I'll give you about 2-3 minutes to do that and see what happens. All right. This is a workshop. All right, let's go. Write on the chat. Or you can, if you're on Hoover, write on the Q&A. Anything? Let's start with contradictions, and then we will formulate that. Find a contradiction that you are aware of or you are familiar with. Give me a thumbs up if you're thinking and you're planning to do something. Good. Thank you, Raymond. You're thinking and you're planning to do something. Who else? Either you're resolving a contradiction, a technical contradiction, a physical contradiction, or you're addressing a technical gap. If you start from there, those are potential business opportunities. Not only technology, but service. Say in your household or in your area, you wish you have something that somebody who would be willing to serve you on that. No one? All right. So if you have not done anything, at least somebody mentioned that Raymond is planning to do something. Let me know how I can help you. So with that, at least say, let's look at any idea here. Even a contradiction. You don't have any contradiction? Process automation, speed versus human touch, detail. Yeah. So in other words, you want something speed without human touch, right? Is that what you're saying, Jane? You want the car to move by itself, or you want your computer to analyze the data by itself. Oh, how can we balance this? That's a good one. So if you can think of a way on how to balance it, somebody, if you can solve the problem, somebody will be willing to pay for it because you realize there's a problem. So the idea is now that you find that as a shall we say an opposite or contradiction, you can think about it, and that is the beginning of a business proposition. Process automation, speed, and human touch. Very good. Okay. So let's say another one. How to speed the process without adding more work. Yay, I like that. Speed the process without adding more work. Yeah. Raymond, if you can solve the problem, you have a business model. Because what happens is once you have those in mind, that will be in your mind. So you will develop a technology that will address that. For example, in my case, I went into a very rural community, supposedly to validate our biosensor. And then I realized when I got there that the community has no electricity, right? So originally our technology required electricity. So I said, this is dead on arrival. I mean, we need electricity and the community doesn't have electricity. I mean, they have electricity in the evening, but not during the day. So there was very little power in the area. So I came back to the lab and I said, I need to think through a system where I could just use manual operation and still give me the same result. So that's how of course, by God's grace, that's how I thought about magnetic nanoparticles, because you can manipulate, you can move around your tube and so on, extraction, without using an instrument. You just use a magnet. That's exactly how, of course, by God's grace, I was led to look at magnetic nanoparticles as a way of processing the sample, because of my visit to a rural community where there was no electricity. Does that make sense? All right. So now, thank you for those who shared chat rooms. Congratulations, you have your startup. All right. So now with this, between the idea and the final product, you may be the person who will fill in that gap of moving those ideas to the final product that will add value to society. So this is the summary of my presentation. I presented the entrepreneurial mindset, how you can develop that will influence your research into an entrepreneurial research, meaning customer sensitive products, which will bring you to useful product that someone is willing to pay for. It doesn't have to be for profit. You can develop a business that is non-profit, but non-profit is like not the organizers or whoever owns it do not get benefit financially, but the organization benefits. So you're using the income to keep the organization going. So like Salvation Army is a nonprofit, Red Cross is a nonprofit, but they bring in revenue to maintain their operations, to give salaries to the people who are running it. So you bring in money to maintain the organization, but the owners do not get financially, they don't get the financial benefit from it, but you still need the money to keep the operation going because it requires money to operate the system. So with that, I want to extend an invitation to you, to all of you, to join GARD. If you think you can you can add value to society, you're interested in entrepreneurship, but above all, you want to help the very poor, those communities who need help the most, but can afford the least. All disciplines are needed in making the technologies accessible, adaptable, available to poor communities. So we are extending our invitation to you to join GARD. Please contact me if you are interested. We would love to have you. And with that, any questions? And from the audience? If not, thank you so much. Appreciate your participation and appreciate your time. I'll stop my sharing. And if you have any question, we can do face-to-face interaction for the next 5 minutes. Any question?
Can you see the chat or do you want me to read it to you?
You can read it. I can see the chat. How can we promote entrepreneurship to scientists in national agricultural research institutions from developing countries? Very good question, Jane. Many of these institutions do not have policies that encourage business formation by their own staff. Jane, this is exactly why I developed entrepreneurship for scientists, because I think scientists are not taught to be entrepreneurial. Now, you don't have to have your own business, but you want to have your research useful to society. Not only research for the sake of research, but really customer-sensitive technologies, customer-sensitive research that will add value to society and that will be accepted to society and applicable to society, not only in terms of cost, but also in culturally sensitive, socially sensitive technologies. Yes, the question is, how can we promote? The best way to promote this is to just keep doing, like talking about it, teaching them, because entrepreneurship is there. It's just people do not recognize that they have these opportunities to impact society. And then, as I said, if someone is willing to pay for it, you have a business. Did I answer your question, Jane? Feel free to
I guess,
yeah, go ahead.
can you hear me? Yes, I guess so. But at the same time, working in the international development arena, we often face this, you have a technology, but at the end of the day, you're not able to commercialize it because the institution does not have the mandate. So we may have solutions that can help solve problems of society, but we don't have a mechanism to bring them out from either from the field or from the lab and then bring them into the stakeholders since we don't have the mechanism. So yes, we have the entrepreneurial mindset from our scientists, but they are constrained by doing it and moving to the next step since the institution doesn't have the culture.
Okay, yeah, that will be an institutional problem, I think, right? But that is where, yeah, it's a complex problem. You pose a very complex problem. But there are also, shall we say, weaknesses in many of the technologies that I have seen myself, because not many, but many of the technology I've seen, they are very good technologies, but the scientists have not thought about the cost. Let's say, for example, in my lab, because we are looking at helping low-income countries, low-income communities, I tell my students, if your cost of using this technology is more than $10 or even more than $5, forget about it. Because people in low-income countries cannot afford $5. But if you force your mind to think about that, actually there are technologies you can develop that are less than $5 or even less than $2. So what I have experienced is if you force your mind, you put a boundary to your mind, the mind will work accordingly within that boundary. So creativity and innovation will develop within those boundaries, because you will be forced to find something that are cheaper. So in other words, find something that you can use that are almost free, so that then you can bring the technology cost. So there are technologies, very well technologies, but the cost has not been considered. That's why bringing the customer's voice early on will help really the researcher to think about, if your customers are the farmers, think about their cost function. If your customers are the medical professionals, the doctors, they have a very different cost function. If your customers are the millionaires, they have a very different cost function. So think about that as early as possible. But good question. Thank you. Anybody else? Anyone else who was interested to?
There's one in the Hoover saying, are there any organizations who support scientists to become an entrepreneur?
Yes, there are many. If those are, say for example, Bill and Melinda Gates, many of the foundations who are into social entrepreneurship and so on, they are looking for technologies. They have scouts. They have scouts to look for technologies to help these countries. So if they find your technology that they're relevant and cost effective, they will find you. Yeah. Everybody's trying to find solutions. So if you have the solution, somebody will find you. As long as your solution is affordable and it is easy to manufacture, you can protect your patent, it's patentable, and it is novel. There are many scouts, there are many entrepreneur scouts all over the world. So Chelsea, thank you so much again. I really appreciate your time. I know it's almost the end, but let me know if you want to talk more about entrepreneurship. I have quite a bit of experience. I've taken entrepreneurial classes, short courses on entrepreneurship, and I've been trained in many ways, so I'll be glad to talk. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.